You actually threw this album at us as one that you wanted to talk about. You want to talk a little bit about your relationship with it and why you kind of wanted to dig in?
I do a few of these where make lists or name your favorite album, all these things. It's really hard because I think, like everybody, I love hundreds and hundreds of things, and I can't. It's so hard to choose my favorite things or things I want to talk about. But I don't know. This one always. I'm kind of maybe bringing it up because I'm looking for more answers about it. I'd like just to hear other people talk about it. My relationship with Joni Mitchell. We started as friends.
How many songs did she write about you?
Yeah, there's a couple in there from the late 90s. But no, she, my parents were big fans, but they were just really kind of fans of, I don't think they were fans of like post-Blue Joni, Mm-hmm. I think she like lives in their like 60s folk rock world, and the jazz stuff they probably didn't carry on with that. I do remember my uncle, who was a little more sophisticated. They lived outside of New York, and he had a little deeper bench of a record collection, had this in his record collection. I remember seeing that cover. But we grew up listening to Blue, like Simon and Garfunkel and Blue were in constant rotation. My dad loved those records, and I then loved them. I always considered Blue a masterpiece. So it wasn't really until maybe I was Craig in that mid-30s range when I delved a little deeper. Maybe also, from that Last Waltz, that performance of Coyote is so cool and jazzy and weird, and maybe only in the past 10 years did I start looking in those mid-70s Joni records, the jazz stuff. So I mean, the song to me that maybe caught my attention the most on this record is Down to You, because it is like a holy shit. I can't believe how big this song is, how exciting it is. The arrangement, it's like a piece of classical music. It comes out of nowhere, it feels like. And so that's when I love playing that song for people. And when I've made a few records, and when you're in the studio and you're taking breaks and you talk about, music or what you want something to sound like, I'll always say, like, play Down to You. Have you heard Down to You? And you have someone captive in the control room. It's fun to put it on the big speakers and go, let's just sit here. It's 5 minutes long. It's just like an adventure. It's so exciting to hear that.
Yeah. Let's maybe go through kind of the album. We don't have to go track by track, but let's just talk about how it comes together, a little the backstory, and sort of lay out whether people know the album or haven't revisited it in a while. I think it's really instructive to think about Blue into this. Yeah. And even from a personal experience, I feel like Blue is one of those sort of quintessential like secret albums that someone slips you at one point. And then this is the like double secret that people don't always get to. But, it's the next one where people are like, actually, but it starts with Court and Spark, and I love a album that just like first off says the title of the album within the first 40 seconds.
Yeah.
So we buried the coins he made in People's Park, and we're looking for a woman to Court and Spark.
I don't know, to me that song is like a thesis statement for the whole project in a way that like I can think of very few records that just kind of like lay out just like, here's everything that we're going to get into, and here are all the motifs, and here's all the sort of orchestration, and it's just in this tidy little package, and then everything else feels like it's just kind of like variations on those initial things that are laid out. It's kind of stunning.
It's very adult. Just even the idea of Court and Spark, you're like, you got to really think about what you mean by that, looking to Court and Spark. This is about relationships, but it's a very adult. I can picture, it's like all the characters from Annie Hall, like it's very sophisticated and urbane.
Names I cleared myself, I sacrificed my blues, and you could complete me, I'd complete you.
I could picture Stevie Nicks listening to this in her living room, doing a little cocaine. It's not a party. It's like, very, a little grass, a little white wine, like after reading a Joan Didion book or something, you put on Joan. It's very sophisticated.
I thought of Joan Didion while listening to this. I don't know why. And I mentioned The Smell of Jasmine in my essay because I was thinking about Joan Didion writes about that when she moves to LA, but it's exactly that. Yeah.
There's a real Gatsby thing to the whole thing. Like, people, it's parties, right? It's parties with fabulous people. And what's interesting to me is her persona, not on this record, but also on other records, is very in control. Like, you feel like she's going to go into the party and pick the man she wants, right?
Yeah.
And bring him home. However, she also is vulnerable throughout the record. She talks about jealousy, being jealous and being heartbroken and needing love. And that seems like at odds with the coolness of her a little bit in a way that I think is really powerful.
Yeah, I have a real soft spot for Just Like This Train. Like, I think that one is the one that stops me in my tracks. And maybe it's just sequencing wise, like it comes after Down to You, which I think just everyone is going to knock them sideways. And then you're like, oh my gosh, another kind of just brilliant moment. Do you think it's not exactly jaded, but it's like she's gotten to understand the game, And part of that is an understanding that it's still going to hurt her, right? And she's going to get wrapped up in it. But there is a kind of like dispassionate observation here about the way people court each other and about how love sweeps you up. And she talks about talking to her analyst, and she talks about why do things come as such a shock, when they hurt you. I'm always running behind
time. She's been through the mill a little bit here, right?
Exactly.
I mean, we've been from the mid-'60s. She's gone through Crosby, Nash, who else? Geffen, maybe? Not Geffen as a lover, but I mean, she's been through like a lot of relationships and fairly public, fairly, confessional in her other records talking about these people.
Yeah.
So why does it come as such a shock to know you really have no one?
I don't know that before this, if there's a record that I could think of about that's so much about wealthy people, famous people. Also, it struck me that, and I haven't tested this, but is Taylor Swift the only other artist that's written so many songs from a female perspective about celebrities she's dated? And, sometimes veiled, but there's something there because I was like doing research on the record, and they were saying some of these songs are about Warren Beatty, Jack Nicholson, Jackson Browne, Glenn Frey. I mean, it's like a murderer's row there. And also a scene described of John Lennon was recording rock and roll in the studio at A&M when she was recording this, and she referred to them as Joni's trophies. He said, "Oh, Joni's trophies are here." She brought by like Jack Nicholson and I think I forget someone else to the studio, and he said Joni's trophies. So it's kind of fascinating that she's writing about. I don't know. She's reporting from something that we're all kind of like parties we'd love to be at.
Yeah. Well, this is where I also think it's like the difference between 1973 LA and 1970 LA is pretty big. And you hear that kind of in the difference between Blue and this album. And, not to make it all about the people she dated, but like she goes from dating Graham Nash to kind of going around town with Jack Nicholson. And I think there's something there. James Taylor was in the mix too, in between those. And actually James Taylor, funnily enough, who was like really battling heroin addiction. You don't think of James Taylor as a corrupting influence, but she was, I think, saw kind of a darker side of the industry. And that's a lot of what's going on here, right? Blue just like made her so famous, and she really starts to kind of wrestle with that. But yeah, you hear a little bit of her kind of coming to have understood, okay, this is how the game's played, both in terms of love and in terms of fame and Los Angeles.
Me, but I couldn't let go of LA, city of the fallen angels.
I'm so curious, like how much she was part of an LA scene in like 73, 74. Like, is she going to Laker games with Jack Nicholson? Like, is she part of that? I don't know.
There's a couple stories I know about this record, and one that fascinates me and says a lot about the misogyny of the time, I think, is I believe this is the first record of hers on Geffen's new label, Asylum, correct?
Yeah, and that song, Free Man in Paris, is about him.
Right.
So I've heard.
I deal in dreamers and telephone screamers. Lately I wonder what I do if
So I don't know if this is apocryphal or anything, but I heard this story or read it somewhere, is that she came in to play it for Dylan and Geffen, who also Dylan had just signed to Asylum. And his first record for Asylum was kind of the somewhat forgettable Planet Waves. Mm-hmm. Not maybe a high watermark for Bob, but it was considered like a big deal because it was like the band is on it. He made it with the band. He had never really made a record with the band. And in the office, apparently they play Joni's Court and Spark, and no one says anything about it. They just go right to Planet Waves after that. It was almost like, in my mind, it was like they listened to Court and Spark and they're like, cool. All right, let's play this other record. And like, that blows my mind that you could sit there and listen to that record and not have anything to say about it from those two guys. But
it's funny. I've heard actually that Bob Dylan fell asleep was the other apocryphal.
Oh, really?
I think that he actually fell asleep while listening to it. And then I've heard people say, oh, he was actually doing that because he wanted to kind of like impress Geffen, who was also there, or like play a joke. But either way, there's like, that's kind of negging.
It's disrespectful.
Going on. Yeah. Especially when you are playing
deeply disrespectful. Technically, like, also, I just like, I don't know how overrated or underrated this is, but like her technical acumen in the studio is maybe on full display here on this record throughout. Her self-harmonizing, her like all the vocal layers she does, all the arranging, like she's just like at her most sort of savant in the studio here.
waiting for a car, climbing the hill.
Even though I kind of came to Joni Mitchell late in my 30s, I did know Help Me because Prince mentions it in the Ballad of Dorothy Parker.
My favorite song, she said, and it was Joni singing. Help me, I think I phone rang, and she said, who ever's calling?
And Prince loved Joni Mitchell so much.
Yeah.
I think like that may be one of the only people you could think of as a peer as far as technical studio mastery and musicianship, etc. I think he recognized maybe a peer or saw something in her to emulate because it is that sophisticated musically.
So Help Me is the second track on here. It's the single. I think it's Joni Mitchell's biggest song.
Help me, I think I'm falling in love with you. How you gonna let me go there by myself? That's such a lonely thing to do.
And then, we have songs like The Same Situation, Car on a Hill. And then I think in the second half, after we have Down to You, which is sort of anchoring the middle of the album, it does kind of cut loose a little and gets a little jazzier and like floatier, I would say, in the second half.
When there's so much sweetness in the dark, waiting for a car, climbing the hill.
It's like an Andrews Sisters vibe to it.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, my favorite is Raised on Robbery, and it always has been.
He was sitting in the lounge of the Empire Hotel. He was drinking for diversion. He was thinking for himself. A little money riding on the maple leaves.
I'll tell you why I like it. I've never heard another great song that mentions a hockey game, or at least not as big. In Help Me, there's a reference to dancing with a hole in the stocking. I forget the lyric exactly, and I'm not sure this is true. It said it's a reference to the song Dancing with the Dolly with the Hole in Her Stocking, which was popularized in the 40s by the Andrews Sisters.
Well, there you
and
go.
I would push that away, except for Raised on Robbery is such obviously an Andrews Sisters kind of nod,
I wanna dance with the dolly with the hole in her stocking while her knees keep a knocking and her toes keep a rocking. Dance with the dolly with gonna dance by the light of the moon.
And it's funny. It's like, I think like great songwriting, like my favorite songwriters, Bob Dylan, Nick Cave, etc., are at times funny that make you smile, you know? And I think it's a funny song. And it's a great, well-written song. It's a short story, really. The detail when she says the government gave us $3,000, she should have seen it fly away. I think that's incredible.
It's about a prostitute, I think, is sort of what the thought is. She does something there that she does throughout this album that I think really marks a shift. And certainly if you compare it to Blue, she is writing, there's so much more they and you in this album than I. And even more so, she's writing in the persona of another person in a couple of these songs. As I mentioned, I mean, Blue is literally like, it just feels like a diary entry. You know, I think confessional isn't even the right word to describe it. It's just like pouring out of her. And here she's crafting it lyrically to a point where she's actually inhabiting other people, even male characters, and writing in their voice, which I think really marks the shift here.
Turning Down to You, which won the Grammy for the best arrangement for a vocalist in 1975, which makes sense. Who would beat it?
Constant stranger, you're a brute, you're an angel, you can crawl, you can fly too, it's down to you. It all comes down to you.
It's just incredible, but there's all these lines throughout the record that make me think of what, you know, in my essay, when I was talking about sort of the darkness of the time, there's a line, with heaven full of astronauts and the Lord on death row. There is a disillusionment and it's like, it feels like a darkness has come up. When it comes to Love Is Gone and that arrangement, it's really, really heavy. And I think about when I kind of discovered this record, discovered Joni Mitchell, it was a time when I was finding things more heavy emotionally than musically heavily for the first time in my life, when I'd say, like, you know what, this is actually heavy.
With heaven full of astronauts and the Lord on death row, while the millions of his lost and lonely ones call out and clamor to be found.
It's so damn wise. It's so like a grown up and like perceptive. I'm looking at the lyrics now too, because I don't remember lyrics very well of anybody, including my own. But just the idea of everything coming and going, marked by lovers and styles of clothes, like that's really smart and not maybe something a lot of her peers are there yet with. Like it's something like they're going to come to some of that. They're still in the middle of the party. Like she's like left the party and is thinking about the party already.
Same Situation has those lines that I think are my favorite on the whole album, where she says, "You've had lots of lovely women. Now you turn your gaze to me, weighing the beauty and the imperfection to see if I'm worthy. Like the church, like a cop, like a mother, you want me to be truthful. Sometimes you turn it on me like a weapon, though, and I need your approval." So like, yeah, it's wise, but part of the wisdom is like she knows that there's a game being played and that it's going to hurt her. It's wise, but it hasn't figured anything out, which I think is probably the most true kind of stance.
You've had lots of lovely women. Now you turn your